Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for your kind introduction. The title of my speech today is Crisis of Multilateralism and the Korean Perspective. I hope this title fits this very important conference. In a sense, this sort of subject is somewhat related to the major theme of this very important conference, because somehow, in order to survive, Korean economy must catch up with whatever is happening in the international scene. So, in this presentation, I'd like to share with you first what is happening in the international market at the moment, and whether or not this WTO system, which is what we call multilateralism, so-called, what is happening to the WTO system at the moment, and whether or not Korea is really ready to cope with these changes that are happening in the international scene. So the contents are as follows. History of multilateralism first, and the multilateralism and Korea's trade, and recent trend of WTO, and prospect of multilateralism as I view it, and then what are you going to do if Korea is really serious about these new changes in the international scene? What kind of initiative do we think we should have? And then the conclusion. Since time is very much limited, let's say, let me skip the history of multilateralism. I know everyone does already know that the GATT was created in 1947, and then there are a bunch of the negotiations to cut down the tariff from 1947 to 1973, and back in 1986 to that's typo error, 1993, that's a typo error, from 1986 to 1993, there was a long negotiation process, the so-called Uruguay round negotiations. And then after this negotiation, the WTO was born in 1995, the World Trade Organization that was launched the first time of the world economic history. The momentum was the leadership of Mr. Clinton, the President of the United States at the time, and then Chairman of the leaders meeting of the APEC back in 1993, and he decided to muster the wisdom of all the participants of the APEC countries and try to give a strong support to whatever the Uruguay round negotiation has had until that moment, and then he proposed to accept the Uruguay round negotiation agreement. And there was 127 countries participated, and finally WTO was born. And during this period of time, from 1947 to 1995, when the WTO was newly born, Korea is one of the most sort of remarkable examples of the countries that benefited out of this the free trade regime led by GATT first and then WTO. And here are some examples that the cases of the Korea's the benefits out of this free trade regime of GATT and the WTO. let me skip this. And Korea indeed has enjoyed very much this free trade regime, and it actually used that as one of the sort of development means, tools to make up its most rapid growth among the developing economies at the time. But something happened to the WTO system recently. There are a bunch of regionalism that took place in the international scenes. Like regional entities were born in spite of the fact that the WTO does exist to manage all the international transactions throughout the world, but the regional entities also newly born. The European Union is one example, NAFTA and AFTA, Mercosur, APEC, etc. And not only that, there are many free trade agreements among the small number of countries, regionally like close countries or somewhat like-minded countries. They get together to form a free trade agreements among themselves. That's a really strange kind of trend, because the WTO was supposedly able to manage all kind of transactions in the world, but why should we need these regional entities among some smaller number of countries? The reason was that there's an article 24 in the GATT rules that indicates that the small size free trade agreements is allowed if it's a small size agreements, small size trade entities sort of enhance the degree of free trade over and above the average free trade sort of level of the WTO as a whole. And there are a bunch of arguments among the economists whether or not these FTAs are helping the free trade system or it is sort of kind of bottleneck of the WTO system. Paul Krugman, for example, is strongly sort of positive about this new development that is the FTAs, because as many FTAs are formed here and there, and then all these participants are working for freer trade, even over and above the WTO's level, then the summation of these small FTAs will be the new order sooner or later, which will push the whole WTO system toward the freer and then better system. On the contrary, Professor Bhagwat, he has a different idea. That is, well, the trade diversion is going to take place if the whole world is, just watching the WTO's rules and regulation alone. Then the whole world will be able to enjoy the trade creations. But as the small guys are, taking place here and there and so on, they are doing their trade transactions, trade activities separately, then trade diversion will take place. So it may not be so helpful for the development of WTO. Another new development was the open regionalism. Some regional entities, APEC is one of the best examples, indicates that the FTA, small size FTA, can apply to other countries even though they are not a member of these small FTAs, if and only if they would like to abide by the rules of that small FTA. So as this open regionalism permeates. The thing is that the regional entities tends to be lesser important compared to the WTO system itself. Another sort of serious change is neo-protectionism. That is happening in recent years. Mr. Trump's America First, Buy American, Hire American policy is actually protect the American markets against the free trade. Also, USA has decided to get out of the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. And well, as you look at the TPP very closely, the China has not been included there. So TPP itself has been getting a lot of attention from the world community, but at the end of the day, TPP seems to be lesser and lesser important than as it expected it should be. And Brexit is another change. That is, Britain decided to get out of the EU system. The EU, as you know, is the best known, the free trade system, but for some reason or another, Brexit, British people decided to get out of this EU system, which indicates indicates that the world trade system tends to go toward the neo-protectionism. And on top of that, the WTO's grip power tends to be weaker and weaker. You see the DDA negotiations, we call it the 9th negotiation process of the WTO, but it is going nowhere at the moment. It began in year 2001 in the Doha, but nothing has happened. Nothing has happened so far. The negotiation is in the deadlock situation. So that means the WTO's gripping power seems to be getting weaker and weaker. Let me skip some other stories about the recent trend with the WTO. And let me quickly get into the question, what we think the multilateralism, the future of the multilateralism. I think the major structure of the WTO stays pretty much the same in the coming 5 to 10 years, but nevertheless, there are two major changes in the management system of the WTO. The first one is the limited application of plurilateralism, and the second one is open applications of plurilateralism. The multilateralism is the case where WTO is working really effectively throughout the world. But if that doesn't work, then a small number of like-minded countries get together and then they try to create a new kind of system and try to put that in the annexes of the WTO rule book, and they would like to enjoy their own free trade system by themselves, sort of excluding other countries, other member countries of the WTO. These two different kind of methods will be used by WTO for some years to come. If that is the case, then we have to take a look at this new WTO mechanism very closely, and we have to ask ourselves whether or not this new SOP, Standing Operation Procedure of WTO, is really working good for our country or not. Well, as far as the Korea is concerned, our economists, the majority of the Korean economists seems to be in the agreement that Korea is supposed to uphold this WTO type of multilateralism no matter what. Even though some major countries would like to go for like a neo-protectionism, we should not be shaken by this kind of new trend. Korea, as one of the best known examples of open economy, and also the country that has been benefited most out of this open trade system, must be able to uphold this multilateralism by helping WTO even more strongly. And I think the Korean economy can do it because we do have that sort of traits in the DNA of the Korean people. I gave you some the Korean wordings that describes Korea's strong will to share these the values of the openness, that is 홍익 and 주례 and 품앗이 and 토시. These are all Korean words, but these words indicates that we Korean people would like to go out even more strongly to the world, saying that we're going to be more open, and we're not going to be shaken by this neo-protectionism. And then we like to go back to the basic, to the spirit of Uruguay round that created the WTO system back in 1995. And therefore, Korea would like to participate in many international organizations or institutions that work for the universal values: freedom and justice and welfare, human rights, environment, and fairness, and the like. So I created a new word, that is co-renter. Britain would like to exit, so we see Brexit, but Korea would like to enter to this international new order. So co-renter is our new catchphrase to get through this very difficult period of the neo-protectionism. Thank you very much.